Hey, everybody. I'm David Bloom with Next TMT, co-founder, and I'm here with my co-founder, Daniel Frankel, talking about all things technology, media, and telecom. Lots to talk about this week, improbably, as we wind down the summer. A big deal for that most intangible of valuable assets, wireless spectrum. It looks like it'll keep Charlie Ergen's company afloat by selling it all off at a price of $23 billion. Well, basically resetting the entire wireless industry. What next for EchoStar with all those satellites? FCC's Brendan Carr finds new companies and sectors to put the arm on. Aren't we lucky? ESPN honors one Hall of Fame broadcaster with a loving goodbye tribute, but shuffles another to the second team in yet another turnover of its NBA first team of announcers. We also look at why two hugely successful films out of Asia had wildly different experiences in the U.S. box office, surprisingly big AI related job cuts in the industry you would least expect. And finally, the people behind The Office think the newspaper business is more like Dunder Mifflin than you might hope. So let's get started, Dan. I guess the biggest dollar news of the week was the $23 billion deal between EchoStar and AT&T.
Mm.
It is perhaps the least exciting news of the week, but it is a
Really?
whole lot of zeros involved, and it does keep EchoStar afloat. What were your thoughts on the deal?
Well, I mean, I think the spectrum is water in the desert right now. It's a very hot resource. And in terms of competing with T-Mobile and Verizon and what's left of the U.S. wireless business, that's a very big leg up for John Stankey and AT&T. I think also is a blow to the big cable industry, which is they had a third competitor in fixed wireless access because a lot of that spectrum is going to be used to prop up. AT&T also has an FWA business, but it's a lot more nascent than T-Mobile's and Verizon's.
Yeah, as I say, theirs isn't nearly as far along. I know it just doesn't. I mean, I'm an AT&T subscriber or customer for my wireless, but fixed wireless, they really don't seem to have much of a presence. It's much smaller, right? The footprint that they have already at this point.
Yeah, Lightshed Partners had an interesting take. It's it affects a number of constituencies. One of them is Elon Musk because there's more spectrum down the road that pertains to his satellite broadband business. EchoStar is unwinding. There are more goodies to fall off the tree, and that I'm talking about Starlink in the broadband business. And for now, it staves off liquidation from EchoStar. They were pays off all their debt, which is
It's of all their debt. I mean, they're back to a adequately financed business now, right? I mean, it's like, what are you doing? How are you going to make more money? But you sold the back 40 on the farm. Now, how are you going to what kind of crops are you going to raise?
full circle. They embarked 4 years ago when Sprint and T-Mobile merged. The deal was that don't worry, regulators. EchoStar here, Charlie Ergen, they're going to build a fourth wireless network based on all the spectrum that we're giving them, with the spectrum they're going to buy. It'll be great. We're going to build a 5G network.
It'll be something. I don't know anybody said it was going to be great, but I mean the reality is that was always ambitious. I mean, to roll out a whole new network with actual millions and millions of subscribers paying for the privilege of being on the EchoStar network was always kind of ambitious, to put it mildly.
Well, if a $10 billion build out is too ambitious for your blood, David, I don't know
You
what we're
know, I've got a $10 billion build out of CapEx next week. I'm starting it while I'm actually overseas. So I
yeah,
look
it was
forward to
10
it's going to be
billion
great.
was like that wasn't the number. It was higher than that. But
It was much higher than 10 billion. Yeah. 10 billion felt like a gettable bite, but
they
not so
paid
much.
13 billion and change for the spec in 2022 for the spectrum they ended up selling AT&T $23 billion. So
So that's good. That's good. That's like a pro basketball franchise escalation in value in 4 years. You turn around and you've done a from 13 billion to 23 billion to $10 billion in profits. It's pretty good. And you didn't have to build out anything.
A lot of folks, they embarked on a a kind of innovative network build out that employed a lot of third party vendors who are now going to be left holding bags, and it's going to get messy. If you read our newsletter, Light Reading had a really good assessment of that sort of collateral damage that I thought was interesting and good to read. So anyway, that's the
But
final.
there are a couple of bigger issues here, though. One is, okay, AT&T can finally start flexing its muscles because now that John Stankey's got everybody on board with his approach to employee relations, it was so warm and cuddly and just really gets you going.
Type for Labor Days.
Perfect for Labor Day. Either you're with us or you're unemployed. That's John. Get off the boat. But he's laying out that thing, gonna dive into fixed wireless access, or what do they call it? Cable mobile? No. What's the pejorative term? What?
Sailor broadband.
Yeah, cellular broadband. But I mean the reality is these guys are definitely nipping at the heels of the cablers. So there's that. But sitting over all this, you mentioned Elon and Starlink. And Starlink is interesting. If they were able to secure more wireless spectrum, right now you can certainly use Starlink in lots of places, but my understanding is its bandwidth is such that you're not running video off of it, right? You're using it for stuff, but you're not necessarily running video unless you're a defense contractor and it's a special part of Starlink.
I think
Is
they
that
call
right?
it US4 is the treasure trove of relevant spectrum that EchoStar has in abundance, and that is the next level to be freed up. It's not apparent to me what the relationship is between Elon Musk and the current government.
Yeah, you and everybody else. I think that's the $10 billion question. Actually, it's probably a lot more than that. It looked like Elon was greased. We were writing about this 6 months ago, 7 months ago, when Elon was Don Trump's best buddy and little brother, and it looked like, oh, it's just going to slide right on over, whether they wanted to or not, and it's going to go right to Starlink, and they're going to go to town. That seems less certain. Where else could it go?
EchoStar spectrum?
Yeah. What could EchoStar do with the spectrum that it still has? I mean, it's got a bunch of satellites in the air. It's got spectrum to ship stuff over it. They don't have much of a satellite TV delivery service anymore. It doesn't make any money.
I think at this point, the idea that we'll build a fourth network is over. I don't think
Oh,
they have.
that's dead. But like, what do you do with EchoStar? It's like, okay, you're back to zero, so you're not going to be a big honking bankruptcy case. But now what? You got a bunch of satellites in the air that can carry pretty good levels of video, for instance.
Like you said, I'll leave it to the Lightshed guys to project what's going forward, but I don't know that this is a going concern has much of a future. It doesn't appear so
All
on
right.
paper. I
It's
haven't
not a
heard.
collapsing concern, but it's not got anywhere to go. So then you're just selling it for parts.
Right.
And then maybe that keeps Charlie, God knows what Charlie would get into then.
Controlled liquidation call? I don't know.
I guess you can jump instead of getting pushed. So Elon could come in, but is the bandwidth they have enough to allow Starlink systems to be able to deliver something like what fixed wireless is now delivering into homes? Never mind the big pipes that the cable companies control.
I think so. I mean, fixed wireless is imperfect. It's got its own concerns. It's not only reliant on there being excess bandwidth. Remember, it was built with the promise that, and this is T-Mobile and Verizon speaking, this is just froth. This is just extra uh, bandwidth that we have.
Yeah, it's just laying around. Yeah, we haven't had a chance to use it, but we'll fill in the gaps here a little bit. It's like putting mud in the chinks in your log cabin, right? That's what it was.
And I have used that service, and it. I don't know if it was a fair shake because it was constrained by a lot of buildings.
But that's
Was
a big deal, right?
Yeah,
So fixed wireless sounds really great till you live in New York or, I don't know, a bunch of dorms at the University of California, Santa Barbara campus or whatever. I mean, it's like if there are buildings or a lot of trees, G at the highest levels of throughput really has a problem unless it's right there. It's got to have a very short reach to be able to
We're
deliver that higher.
wading into levels of spectrum talk that I don't think you or I are equipped to handle. But
Okay.
I do think that the principal place, the shopping mall that's now available for those in need, is now EchoStar's warehouse of broken dreams. So that I do.
Broken dreams and working spectrum. The FCC's Brendan Carr, your favorite apparatchik in the Trump administration, has found a new company and technically a new industry that I'm not sure he has much authority over, to be frank,
He
to
wants to.
put some pressure on to get a deal done between the company and some of its partners that were having a hard time right before football season.
Well, that's kind of an annual rite of fall football passage. We have a major
Now, you
carrot,
know fall is coming when this happens, right?
and all these deals are timed. They won out because they were started the last time during football season, brings everybody to the negotiating table because their customers are clamoring for their game. A dispute can start in early June at the end of the TV season, and it won't get resolved till the end of summer because there's no natural push-o demand to sort of get everybody negotiating. So there's that kind of natural heat and fire. I mean, it's just a very typical programming dispute between YouTube TV and Fox Corp
Yeah,
about
but tell
what.
me what the FCC control is over virtual MVPDs.
I'll get there. As of now, none. But they had Symington, one of Brendan Carr's aides, before he left the agency a few months ago, wrote out ambitions to sort of level up the media playing field by giving more regulatory control to the FCC over
Which does
virtual.
not now exist, though. That's the important thing. It does not now exist.
Anywho, so Fox and Google get into a programming dispute. It escalates the usual way these things do. Both of them said, soon, YouTube TV subscriber, you might not have access to our premium channels because
The
these folks
usual
are being
stuff.
so unreasonable.
Yeah.
And then YouTube starts back, all we want to do is provide you your content. All we do is try. And Fox is being so unreasonable. It wants to charge us so much. That usual rhetoric.
Right.
And you got Ohio State playing Texas on Saturday on the big noon kickoff. Of course, it's going to get resolved. We're going to give you the Buckeyes. Of course, they're the national champions. And so anyway, Carr sticks his neck out there on X the way he usually does. And his tweet isn't like, hey, you two, get to the bargaining table and resolve this. It's, hey, you two, don't you dare black out those Fox channels. I'm going to see this game. Meaning it's YouTube is the bad guy and Fox.
Google get it done. Wasn't that the line? Google get it done.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's kind of a startlingly biased position for a government regulator who shouldn't be tweeting about this at all anyway, unless it drags on for several years. So,
Right.
so
Yeah, it's a very early intervention in that and seems ahead of any congressional authority. And these things get, as you say, it is an annual rite of passage. The one exception was when Charter said, Chris Winfrey said, go ahead, make our day. Don't be on the air on the biggest cable provider in the nation when football starts, Disney.
that happened
We're
2 years
willing
ago.
not to pay.
And that was, that was very revelatory where we were at the time. Pay TV was on its last ropes, and Winfrey had a plan. Just give us the SVODs, and we can still, this way the product isn't so degraded. And
Right.
the
Yeah,
bundle.
he reset things. That was absolutely a really important reset. I mean, we've got wireless now headed toward maybe a reset or new players in the game in a different way, I guess. AT&T escalating, maybe. God, who knows, right? With as you say, we just don't know Elon's relationship with the government anymore. Speaking of ESPN, part of Disney and sports, they had a wonderful, loving goodbye to 90-year-old Lee Corso, who had been on College Game Day for most of the last 38 years, spending every week for the last 30 years nearly, putting on the mascot
Now, the
headset.
last time that we gave our own loving tribute to Lee Corso, which I think we've done 3 now in 5 months, I thought he was gone. I was surprised to see his mug on the television.
He had some health stuff and he's been back and forth, lingering effects that apparently only gotten worse from a stroke and slurred his speech. And those have gotten worse and it's been difficult for him to ad lib. But it's actually, I have to say, really sweet to see Kirk Herbstreit, his longtime desk mate, being very solicitous of him for a while now. But they had a great thing. Lee dressed up in a tux. They gave him one last hurrah. He picked Ohio State, as he did on the first time he put on one of these mascot headsets, and it turned out he was right. He's got a pretty good record. He also picked Florida State, which
Lee
thrashed
he has
Alabama.
been somewhat impeccable. And,
Yeah,
betting against Steve Sarkisian in Texas, I'll take that bet.
yeah. The other thing that I liked about Corso was very clear. Here's an old football coach. Here's a fun little fact. His college roommate at Florida State, where he played football in college, his college
Yeah.
roommate was Burt Reynolds, the who was a halfback at the
I mean, was a
university.
defensive back.
I'm sorry. Well, he may have been a defensive back, but his college roommate was Burt Reynolds.
Burt Reynolds was a defensive back.
I think he was a halfback. I think he was a running back.
I'll have to settle this bet after.
Actually, back then it was long enough ago. He may have been both.
True. That's true.
Both things could be true because that's kind of what you did back then. Anyway, so he went on, had a pretty good, not amazing, but a decent career as a coach, and then a head coach at a couple of Division One, what they called Division One back then, powers, and then he ends up over at ESPN. Despite being a coach, he actually understood that what he was doing was entertainment. Yes, it's about football, but it's entertainment first, and let's be entertaining. And that is not something, I have to say, that everybody quite gets when they're sitting at those desks. So I will miss his approach to the way he was entertaining and informative. At the same time, they were saying a loving goodbye to Lee Corso. They were giving a straight arm to another Hall of Fame broadcaster, Doris Burke, who has long labored in the vineyards to women's and men's basketball at the college level, at the pro level, sideline reporter. Last year, she was the latest addition to ABC slash ESPN's first team of announcers. This year, while she was negotiating, they decided, no, we're going to go with Tim Legler, who's, to his credit, apparently also somebody who focuses a lot on preparation ahead of time, but I have to say has never really struck me as that interesting. He kind of looks like just another dude.
Legs drafted out of LaSalle, toiled in the now defunct Continental Basketball League, became one of the early 3-point specialists.
He still only averaged 7 points a game in his entire NBA career, so he was not exactly Splash Brothers 27.
No, he was not, but he carved out a niche as a undersized, even at 6'4", guard who, an inspiration everywhere for
underachieving guards. That doesn't mean he's going to be. Look, I'm a little annoyed because I think Burke was good, and I think
justified for being annoyed because she was good, and she
was not only good, the respect she got,
just like Jeff Van Gundy did, just like Mark Jackson did, and this sort of like Cracker Barrel discussion emerges on X among the crackers of X, and they put her under the barrel, as our clever headline in Next TMT shows today. I do think that Jimmy Pitaro was kind of catering to the same forces that brought us Portnoy and what was the thing? Who's that other loud mouth at ESPN?
Pat McAfee.
Listen, it's a hard job, and I'm not going to sit here. But there's a certain segment of the audience that goes for those types of guys, a certain segment who understand authentic professionals who bring in every game and really understand the game. There's a former editor of ours. I follow him when I know something's going down the drain because of a lynch mob, who's talking about, she just would latch on to like minutia, nuance. Just that's so annoying. It's just like, oh, you mean facts and a game that is a very nuance-driven game, and she knows people as insights. Oh, you're talking about that. I feel very strongly about it too. It seems like every time I connect to somebody on ESPN, they're gone. A
They're
TNT,
doomed.
yeah. So
Dan has the touch of death. So beware, he's now rooting for Tim Legler. But that being said, this is the fourth year in a row they have a new team. Van Gundy was actually the original sin on this one because Van Gundy considered by many to be the best analyst on in basketball. And I think back, wasn't he advising the Clippers most recently? But he knows what he's doing, and he's a really good analyst. And they got rid of him for reasons that aren't always clear. You know, these ESPN execs, Legler's biggest qualification for getting the gig is he's really tight with the ESPN executive who made the decision. He had worked in studio with the guy when the executive was running all the shows, and now that he's up, he's like, I want to go with legs. I don't want to Doris doing it. And it's like, I
well,
think
for
Doris
three
was distinctive
white
and really
guys
respected.
deprived of their entitled vertical athleticism, it's a win, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Doris still has a gig. She did get her contract renewed, which is in its own right a bit of an achievement in anything in media right now. It is worth noting it's not just the media getting hammered. I ran across some stuff about cuts all over the place in the business you'd least expect to be cutting, which is the Magnificent Seven, down 27%. At one of the Magnificent Seven, the small, I think it's Google, the small management teams have been cut 35%. 14,000 are heading out the door at Amazon. Microsoft got rid of 15,000 already. I mean, it's kind of amazing. They're using some of this money to finance these nine-figure paydays
Oh, we
for
should
the
celebrate this.
superstar AI guys, you
Get out
know?
there on stage with a chainsaw. People are, yeah, waste of space, baby. Get out of here.
The only person, no, the part of it is really that AI allows them to get rid of a set of folks to supposedly manage younger employees. I'm really fascinated to see who's going to be actually running these companies in 10, 15 years because they've wiped out most of the middle management tier. It's like, who, like robo managers is going to be your boss? Is that going to go meet with, as I put it, God Emperor Trump in a White House summit in 2035? Because that's going to be a hell of a meeting. So anyway, it's something to watch. I was fascinated, I have to say, by the very different reception to Asian inflected films or Asia connected films had in the box office. Both have been very successful, but one did nothing. Nizha, I'm sorry I'm saying it wrong. Nizha 2, a sequel to a wildly successful animated Chinese made film, was even more successful. $2.1 billion in box office, almost all of it from within the borders of China. Well, they had a little tiny run in the fall. I mean, in the spring, and they made like 21 million, all that, but it was still in Chinese language, and the animation is quite good. It's based on a treasured Chinese historical novel, but lots of nationalistic stuff kind of mixed in because that's what you got to do in China these days. But a beautiful state of the art animated film. And then they came back. A24 got involved. They did a English language dub and they re-released it, and it stiffed. It did $1.7 million over 3 weeks. Nothing. So 2.1 billion versus basically a rounding error was kind of remarkable. And that probably doesn't matter to the filmmakers that much, but it matters a little bit about A24, which the New Yorker has a very interesting long take on. Is they're trying to step up their game with bigger swings in the film business. This is the cult indie film place it's become for
So
its
film.
hardcore fans. You know, they go see, oh, it's an A24 film, I'll go see that. Back the way Miramax was in the 90s before everybody figured out what a creep Harvey Weinstein was.
So Chinese film tanks, but Korean K-pop movie on Netflix.
K-pop Demon Hunters, which is a Netflix animated film. It's an animated musical, basically. So it's K-pop, and it's a bit of a confection. But they put a bunch a bunch of their songs made it onto Billboard. The film itself was such a big hit that Ted Sarandos was talking about it at the last quarterly earnings about it. It's been really great for us. We're going to be doing more K-pop. And so it came out. They don't, Ted doesn't put stuff in theaters, right? We've got the
I
Sarandos
do
Rule, but there's a new
I do
exception
compare
apparently.
anything. I've observed. I have a dear friend who's a nurse, and she is really close to her college age daughter, and they can have connected over the last couple of years based on K-pop. It is a phenomenon in terms the Kisry guys, those guys who do live streaming. Uh, they do a lot of regional sports networks and stuff, but a big part of their business is live events around K-pop. It's an inexplicable phenomenon, inexplicable in terms of why American audiences have embraced it so much. But to compare anything, even another output from another Asian country, to what's going on there, I think it's kind of apples and oranges.
Well, I mean, the Korean entertainment business, both in music. I mean, we look at Parasite winning the Oscar. You look at Squid Game being one of the most watched TV series of all time, coming out of Korea. Bong Joon Ho is just awesome. And Blackpink has done great, and BTS, and so on and so forth. They've all just hit it out of the park. This one is even more, but what they did was they did not release this in theaters until this last week when they did a special sing-along version for 2 days, 1,700 theaters. People turned out. They sold out screenings in more than 1,000 of the locations on Saturday. But that being said, that being said, uh, they did between like 15 and 18 million. Netflix didn't release any box office numbers, but that's the estimate from calling around and all that they did, which meant it won the weekend, which has never happened for something like this.
What you call the Sarandos Rule.
We have the Sarandos Rule. Thou shalt not have a theatrical release, no matter how big a filmmaker you think you are. And two exceptions now.
Plus, a couple caveats you threw there.
Two caveats now. One, there's a bunch of songs that a bunch of musical geeks will show up for a special screening to sing along to because they have burned those songs into their brain pan permanently. Or two, it's an Oscar contender because they will do a handful of Oscar contenders that will get a run for 2 or 3 weeks, mostly to make the Academy voters happy-ish. I mean, they're not really happy with Netflix or anything at this point, but to get them to show up. So those are the only two exceptions. Otherwise, we don't care who you are. And in fact, that's cost them a few deals.
And the Sarandos fellow, you think he knows what he's doing?
He's done okay. He may not know what he's doing any more than the rest of us, but he's doing okay. And until further notice, we'll presume that he's headed in the right direction, that this Netflix thing might work out as opposed to being a giant Ponzi scheme.
$1 of cash flow is pretty good, right?
Yeah. People used to say, oh, it's just a giant Ponzi scheme, and they're just going to fall apart. And it turns out Ted was more right than they were. And Reed, of course, because Reed's pretty bright. I do want to wrap this up a little bit. Behind me is an image from my stepmother who took it while on a boat floating down the Rhine River in Germany. I will soon be heading to Amsterdam for the International Broadcasting Conference. We will have some special issues before and during the show, which I will be beavering away at. I won't be much on the Rhine River, I suspect, but I'll be around a whole lot of canals and dikes. So this felt about as close as I could get to Amsterdam with a legitimate
Yeah,
photo.
it's assumed kind of outsized presence within the streaming and video
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
And we'll be there. We're doing a special preview issue on Thursday this week that will arrive in your mailbox. Please don't unsubscribe. Tell your friends. And then we're also doing dailies.
Yeah, and hit me up. If anybody listening is gonna be there, hit me up. Glad to talk, see what you got. Maybe we can do a little quickie video conversation about what you guys are doing there and all that stuff. So, it's definitely gonna be an adventure. We also, I think, are gonna have some presence with, was it SCTE at the end of the month? Is that
I
correct?
participate in the fine American tradition of advertising. Advertising, dude.
Well, apparently that's one of the ways that media companies have paid their way for a while now. In fact, it's really interesting. That is apparently what Peacock is going to do with a sequel of sorts to The Office. So they have greenlit a show called The Paper. It is the Toledo Truth Teller, which is not a real paper any more than Dunder Mifflin is a real paper company. But this is the folks that actually put things on paper and then try to convince people to pay for it. And it's a really interesting time to be doing anything with a print newspaper because, like just this last week, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which is owned by Cox, which is busy merging with Charter, their family-owned hometown paper, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, is going to stop doing print versions of their news. So Dunder Mifflin, we're gonna get a newspaper that's gonna get Dunder Mifflin. So we'll see how that works out. Any predictions on how that one goes? It's an actually what's interesting to me is it's an original program on Peacock, and there aren't a whole lot of those, and they've been really neglected by.
I think they debuted the trailer this week, but this has been out there for a while. And the actor, I forget his name, who played Oscar, is going to reprise the role. It will be interesting to
Oscar the
me.
Grouch, like in his garbage can, or what are we talking about? Oscar?
Yeah, he was the one who was the sort of victim of Steve Carell's wonderful sense of humor on a number of occasions. But it'll be interesting to see if they follow the same kind of formula that the first two iterations did. It was the Sim and Pan thing, and if they do that, that's a difficult. I realize you're rebooting for a new generation, and
Right.
but that's going to be a difficult bar to clear.
There's actually a really sweet, speaking of The Office, the original Office was out of the UK with Ricky Gervais, and acidic is not quite enough of a term to encapsulate all that Ricky did in that really wonderful, but really,
Yeah, there's
really
a fine
mean-spirited
company where you
show.
can be that being spirited, and it was
Yeah,
just fun. A
yeah.
lot of folks, we had those Comedy Central roast, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that
But
both.
Gervais was actually in a different series that I think was on Netflix, where he worked in a newspaper and he had lost his beloved wife, and he was a bitter, bitter, bitter jerk, but eventually softens up, and it ends up being a very sweet show. And I don't off the top of my head remember, but I mean, how much has Ricky done in terms of extended series? I highly recommend it. It ended up being a very sweet show and
Speaking of
often
things that
funny.
you've seen, oh, excuse me, somewhat recently, you were at the LA Coliseum yesterday
It
for
was
opening game against Misery State, I believe.
Missouri State. Missouri State.
So that was what, 73 to 10.
13, 13, 13. Yeah. Yeah, it was something. They did the USC quarterback, uh, starting quarterback didn't even play the second half. They had him on the bench. They were already up, I think it was 42 to
I
10.
watched it. I watched it. It was
Yeah, yeah. And then the backup, this freshman, highly recruited freshman came in and scored 2 running touchdowns and threw for another. I mean, he was pretty impressive. But, Missouri State, which didn't used to be called that, it's actually have the spouse of a beloved cousin of mine is a professor at what is now Missouri State. But for decades, it was Southwest Missouri State down in Springfield, which is down in the Ozarks. And they decided to kind of class up the joint. And part of what they did was we're going to go be a Division One football bowl, a football championship series, football bowl series, the top level. They wanted to move up. And that was kind of a big step as they classed up and they changed their name to Missouri State because there wasn't a Missouri State. There was all these directional state universities.
I have to agree this because it's only fair. My former Daily News Sports Desk colleague, Scott Wolf, I think maybe yours too, maybe you were around in the early 90s.
Yeah, Wolfie was around. I mean, I certainly know his byline very well. I didn't know it.
Inside USC, he was condemning the dynamic of blue bloods playing barely FBS schools, and he called Missouri State Missouri State. I listen. It might be the happiest place on earth. I don't know, but I should attribute that to
Well, you should watch the show on Netflix called Ozark, and then you'll know that it's not necessarily the happiest place on earth. I have spent time down there because of that cousin and her family. Her mother and father lived down in a small town near Springfield, 70 miles away. That's where they grew up, and we grew up visiting them for a number of years. So I actually know the Ozarks, and when I saw Ozark, it's like, oh, this doesn't feel like way out there. There's a wonderful novel called Winter's Bone that ended up becoming a movie that was,
I saw that.
yeah,
Great after I saw that.
yeah, yeah. that was a real break for its lead actress. But it's based on the bad guy in that movie. He's based on a real person who's kind of a runs kind of an organized crime family down out in the woods, and my cousin and her father are now long gone father were chiropractors in that town, and he would come in and they would give adjustments to this man. There's some stories there that I'll just leave alone. But Ozark,
Oh,
the
yeah.
TV show, not that far from Ozark, reality. In Once you get out in those woods, out in those hollers, as they call them. So,
All right. Well, backwoods chiropractor. At some point, we have to get into that. Seems like a topic that.
hey, you can throw your back out in a small town in the Ozarks just as easily as you can getting tense over heading off to Europe with your anxious spouse. So there you go.
All right. Well, since that's happening, we won't get to spiraling sports rights, which have increased from 13.5 billion in 2015 to 30.5 billion in present day.
It's nice somebody put a number on it, but we knew this, right?
Yeah.
We knew this. I mean, it's like,
Well, let's see.
fine.
Paid on TV. You got to pay.
Yeah, you gotta pay. And we would love more people to pay. We have a full boat of beloved sponsors backing us for IBC, and thank you all for your stuff. I look forward to talking to all your people and videos that'll be part of our coverage going forward. But sponsorship makes the money, that makes the world go around. So we appreciate any support we can get. And
You know,
please
the
share
food.
this and the newsletter, Next TMT. I'm David Bloom, the co-founder of Next TMT newsletter and Next TMT Talks, the podcast with my co-founder, Daniel Frankel. Thanks, everybody. And if you're going to be in Amsterdam for IBC, let me know. And if not, just keep subscribing, keep sharing, and keep talking to us. Thanks a lot.